2017 has been a landmark year for women.
People who were bussed into Washington, D.C. from various cities throughout the country.
Sister marches were in 50 states and 32 countries.
Organizers tell us there were about 500,000.
This is our moment. This is our moment.
The year began with women marching in huge numbers in Washington and in cities across the world, just a day after Donald Trump was inaugurated.
The guy sexually assaulted women, he invaded their space, and he bragged about it. And that makes me so angry.
And the year closes with women continuing to make credible sexual misconduct accusations against a who's who of powerful men across industries, including news,
Bill O'Reilly is trying to fight back once again after a stunning report in the New York Times.
entertainment,
Harvey Weinstein, the New York Times reporting allegations by numerous women who say the Hollywood mogul
and politics.
Some of the allegations against me are simply not true.
Roy Moore is a pedophile.
Others I remember very differently.
He's a child molester. That's what's alleged here.
Merriam-Webster declared that the word for 2017 is feminism. They say the word is the most looked up on their online dictionary and that there were 70% more searches for the word this year than in 2016. In my opinion, Merriam-Webster's report couldn't be more timely. In 2017, I've seen women living out this definition in ways that have been affecting change in the balance of power. The whole thing played out in so many unexpected ways that I've never witnessed in my lifetime. Earthquakes can reshape landscapes in mere seconds, but they are preceded by countless incremental actions across many years. Maybe you had your ear to the ground and felt those incidental tectonic tilts and slips that led to this year's seismic shifts. But what were they? And are we prepared for the potential aftershocks in 2018? Today, with the help of two women friends, we're assessing 2017's earthquakes, landslides, and individual actions. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the podcast that tells stories from America's culture divides. I'm Trey Kay. So I have learned a great amount this year, but like with most things on Us and Them, I've got a lot more to learn. So to get more insight on this remarkable sea change in what's happening with women, I thought that I would check in with my friend and PRX sister, Lauren Schiller, who hosts Inflection Point, a podcast about how women rise up. Usually she has conversations with women that can only be had by women, but that everybody needs to hear. But this time she's just going to speak to a dude, and that dude's me.
Trey, I'm willing to make an exception for you. I do talk to men.
Hey, Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation. I think what we're going to cover needs to be talked about.
Right. As I said at the top of the show, the first large-scale event of this year had to be the Women's March on January 21st, just the day after Donald Trump was inaugurated. You attended the Women's March, right?
I did.
Well, tell me about that experience. I mean, was it meaningful?
For me, I have a special place in my heart for marches such as these. When I was little, my mom took me to a march for the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment.
That was back in the
Washington,
1970s,
DC.
right?
In the 1970s, yes, indeed. So I felt like because that was such a memorable experience for me, and I think something that has really driven my worldview since then, I really wanted to take my kids. And so we had so much fun making signs like women's rights or human rights and pussy grabs back. And, my girls are 12 and 14. And I was like, you know what? It's out there in the media. We can go ahead and put it on a sign. So it just felt like this really great bringing together of the community. I mean, we're still feeling the aftershocks of that election, and having an outlet and a place to go where you knew that there were other people who were feeling the same way and who had important messages that they wanted to convey were all coming together was extraordinarily powerful.
Well, it seemed like a real unifying moment at the time. How do you feel that the cohesion of such a huge movement, I mean, I think that it was one of the largest protests in American history, right? Has the cohesion, do you think that it held in the months afterwards?
Oh, Oh, yeah. If anything, the cohesion, the glue, I think has grown more pervasive and stronger. The theme of the march was resistance, but it was also this coming together around the topics that have always mattered, especially to women, but really to everybody, around protecting the environment and reproductive rights and social justice. And so much work on those topics had been done already leading up to the election that just because, the wrong guy got elected to office, in our opinion, all of that work is still continuing. And I think that his election actually galvanized people who were already working on those issues, even if they were just working lightly on them.
Women have become galvanized and are mobilizing in large numbers. Since November 2016, women have taken up with groups like Swing Left, Sister District Project, Action Together Network, and Indivisible. Hatched just a year ago, Indivisible now boasts 6,000 groups across the country, with at least 2 in every congressional district. Meanwhile, others have set their sights on public service. And not unlike the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas encounter at his confirmation hearing, after that, there was a big upsurge in women interested in running for political office. I mean, Barbara Boxer, Dianne Feinstein, Patty Murray from Washington. There were a lot of women who were injecting themselves into politics, and it looks as though that there are a great number of women who are interested in running in the upcoming years, no?
Oh, yes. So one of the organizations that's really committed to moving that process forward and getting great results is Emily's List.
Right.
It stands for Early Money is Like Yeast. It makes the dough rise. I spoke on my program to the woman who was the chief of staff at the time for Emily's List about what was happening in the aftermath of the election around women running for office.
I think Kate Black, let's hear a little bit of what she had to say.
Since Election Day, Emily's List has seen, I think, over 16,000 women come to us and say they want to run for office. That's a historic amount of energy from women looking to run for office up and down the ballot. I think
so. We are seeing more women running for office. And she also makes the point that what they found is that the more women that you see in elected office, the more women and girls believe that it's possible for women to hold office. I mean, one of the things that I do on Inflection Point is try and understand what the driving forces of our time are. What are the things that are going to get us closer to equality? And I think that having more women in elected positions, highly visible, is one of the number one things that we can do. I mean, not all women are going to be, Democratic pro-choice women, which I will proudly say that I am, and that is what Emily's List supports. But even just getting the gender balance right is an important first step. And having different beliefs is part of the program.
Earlier, I mentioned that Merriam-Webster reported that the word feminism was the most searched word on their online dictionary this past year. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That people either are unfamiliar with the term or that they're seeking a dictionary to find the meaning of it?
Yeah, I know. Feminism is probably the most misunderstood word in the English language, and with good reason, right? So Merriam-Webster, which is an online dictionary, defines it as the theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes. But they also have a second definition, which is organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. And I think it's a really good thing that people are looking it up. It's been one of those words that people, men and women, but mostly women, have been debating. Oh, I'm not a feminist, but I believe in equality. And to them, I say, then you are a feminist. Like, it's not a bad word. It's actually a really good word. And I think that it's amazing that more people are embracing it. I mean, I was never one to throw on a T-shirt and have it, slap the word feminist across it. But I've now come to this point where I believe that the word needs to be more ubiquitous. And I'm proud to say that I'm a feminist because I do believe in equality of the sexes. And the question mark is, why does equality of the sexes have to have fem in the word? Is there a point where we're going to get to where we can come up with some other word where we're not trying to correct the imbalance between feminine and masculine?
Of course, some of the biggest changes for women in 2017 came in the form of consequences for men. Earlier this year, a media giant and a jury determined the fates of two celebrities in very different ways. In April 2017, the New York Times reported that Fox News and Bill O'Reilly settled several lawsuits against the host of The O'Reilly Factor. Advertisers fled, and eventually Fox News fired Bill O'Reilly. On the other hand, just 2 months later, a deadlocked jury in Pennsylvania forced a judge to declare a mistrial in the Bill Cosby sexual assault case. Of course, it's not over for Cosby. A retrial will take place at a time when general awareness of sexual offenses has never been higher. I asked Lauren how she looks back at both of these events, given where we are today.
I think that what happened then and all of the other events preceding it, you mentioned O'Reilly and there was Roger Ailes and, all the other people before them. I think all of those things had to happen just like any dramatic moment. Because of this and because of this and because of this, the Weinstein case was able to break the way that it did. And I do wonder if those situations that transpired before Weinstein with Cosby and O'Reilly and Ailes, if those hadn't been brought to light, would the Weinstein case have been broken the way it was? Would women have come forward finally to speak? I mean, I feel like we've reached this breaking point, and that was one of the factors.
And I really appreciated your episode, How to Hit Back at the Harveys, which featured an interview with attorney Carrie Goldberg, who specializes in sexual consent cases, and that she is representing one of the Weinstein accusers. Let's hear a little bit of what she had to say.
In the Weinstein case, everybody knew. And I mean, I'd love to just kind of talk to you about how this is a conspiracy. And in my opinion, there's pervert juice on everybody's hands.
Is that a technical term?
I learned that term in law school, pervert juice.
Is there? You learned it in law school? Like there's like an actual definition associated with it? We need to discuss this.
No, but I think it has to do with the liability of sanctioning and covering up for, in this case, serial sexual predators.
Lauren, pervert juice?
Yeah. We had a good, it's one of these things we had, I had a good laugh about it, but we had to laugh because, that's a disgusting term, first of all. But second of all, it's extraordinarily accurate that there are these men who are taking advantage of their power. And then there are all of these enablers around them who are making it possible for these, what she calls power pervs, to continue making their moves.
And right now we have the women who publicly accused President Trump of sexual misconduct last year are now re-airing their claims.
Yeah, I mean, they're re-airing their claims because nothing has been done about it. And we're now in this environment where it seems like it's possible that something could be done about it. The New York Times, Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey deserve an incredible, and they're getting incredible kudos for breaking this story and for being able to tell it in a way that is respectful to the victims and thoroughly reported. And then Ronan Farrow at The New Yorker also publishing and his story. And for both of those media vehicles for being willing and able to get those stories out there. And not everyone has an outlet to the press to be able to tell their story. But for the 20 or 30 men that have been revealed to be sexual predators or sexual harassers, there's probably 100 times more of them just beneath the surface, harassing at a lower level. And so for me, the question is, yes, I'd like to bring, Trump to account, but what about all the other women out there who are dealing with this on a daily basis?
Anita Hill back in the early 1990s, she didn't come forward. She was subpoenaed to come forward. And I think that we got an example at that time. If you're a woman and you're going to come forward and make these allegations and testify, that here's what's going to happen to you. I mean, people in that hearing questioned her sanity, talked about her, seeming to have be jilted and sex crazed and stuff like that. And now moving forward, these are people who are not making their allegations by a congressional subpoena. They're actually coming out. And I'm wondering, what is the difference between then and now? Why is it that women feel more emboldened to come forward and share about these incidents that happened to them?
Well, there's power in numbers, right? So we have reached this. I mean, I'm just going to keep using the term, but we really are at this inflection point, right, where this has been going on for decades. Or, as I have said, men have been raping and pillaging since the beginning of time, and we're now at this point where instead of women not being heard, they're being heard. Instead of not being believed, they're being believed. And instead of no action being taken when they tell their stories, action is happening. I mean, these men are falling like bowling pins. So there's this social current of believing women. And this moment is being taken seriously.
After a short break, we'll explore how this heated sexual misconduct climate could possibly shift the burden of shame.
Women have felt shame about coming forward about what has happened to them, what had been done to them. And now we may be in a time when men are feeling shame or ashamed of coming forward about what they may have done or have done to women.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
I'm speaking with my friend Lauren Schiller, host of the Inflection Point podcast, about women in 2017. So we saw a lot of upheaval and swift action in the last 12 months. But could a backlash of public opinion be just as swift?
It's clear that this has been a monumental time in our nation's history. But I wonder, if you ever have any concern that there's something about this movement that might be volatile and that maybe something about it could backfire. Will people become desensitized to it? For example, the way that people are desensitized to the things that Donald Trump puts in his tweets. I mean, there's outrage about it, but we've never heard anybody who says the things like the president says. And yet, after a while, it's just like, oh, yeah, well, there he goes again. I mean, do you think that it could be something where, oh, my God, okay, yeah, there's another sexual harassment claim. Honey, could you pass the biscuits? I mean, that it's not that big of a deal.
See, here we are laughing again over something super serious. Could that happen? I think from a consumer of the news media standpoint, yes, I suppose that could happen. But I think that people who are in positions of leadership are not going to be desensitized to it. People want to buy from companies that they believe in. And if companies are not treating their employees well, and now we can finally add not dealing with sexual harassment and assault properly to that formula, then those companies, in theory, will not succeed. And so it's actually to the benefit, if we really want to get monetary about this, it's actually to the benefit of the shareholders for sexual harassment and assault to be taken seriously by the people who run corporations.
Well, you make a great point. I mean, that it seems as though, private companies and nonprofit organizations alike are quicker to respond to these sexual misconduct claims than government has been. I mean, I wonder why that is.
Companies hire people and fire people at will. and that every contract has some clause where if that you can be fired for cause. So companies actually have a way of immediately dismissing someone, whereas in government, we don't.
And one more thing about the government, and this is one of the things that bothers me, is what is happening when there's a sexual harassment allegation that is brought, that often, at least we saw this on the Democrat side, is that it seems as though that there's less care about the allegation and more care about what type of political advantage is going to be lost if, Conyers or somebody like Al Franken loses their seat.
It's so complicated. I mean, from what I've read, the ouster of Franken and Conyers is an attempt to pave the stones that will get us to the ouster of Trump. We've set a precedent. We've called for the resignation of these two accused congresspeople. So therefore, the groundwork has been laid, and it's not, out of the question that, the guy at the top of the pyramid could come tumbling down.
Well,
that's my understanding of it. And so by committing Harry-Carry, it's the moral high ground, but I think there's also this other kind of greater good that is trying to be achieved.
I don't necessarily know if it's Harry-Carry, Lauren. Sometimes I wonder if it is kind of almost offering Al Franken's bloody corpse as an appeasement to the gods, the political gods. And I'm wondering if you think that was worth it.
On that note, only time will tell. I know a lot of people love Al Franken and the work that he has done in Congress, and that his missing from Congress will be a huge blow to Democrats. Hopefully, in the next election cycle, we bring someone in who, can meet him or beat him, and without all the sexual harassment claims clinging to him. But I do think that we are at a time where there can be no room for misunderstanding about what the beliefs of the party are. Women are objectified 27 ways till Sunday, every single day in every single situation. And that is, I've heard this called a quote unquote sexism is normal perspective. That has to shift. I feel like we have a new opportunity with every generation. And if we're at this point where men maybe will actually stop this bad behavior because they're afraid of public shaming or of losing their job, that's a fine start for where we are right now, right? But eventually, I think that we have to get to this point where the only way we're going to stop hearing about this is if the action stops. And maybe eventually, when more women are in positions of power, a complete cultural shift could take place as well.
I want to pivot to healing. And to be clear, not healing for the men who have been accused of misconduct or the perpetrators who have yet to be accused, but the women who have lived in such fear and despair for so long. I mean, how are we going to get to a place of healing for them?
I mean, I think that the first step, and it's the step where we are right now, is just simply being taken seriously and feeling like this behavior will no longer be tolerated. I mean, I guess that brings us to the question, right, of some sort of remediation, or, how do you get made whole again when something horrible like this has happened to you?
What about the model of truth and reconciliation commissions or truth commissions like we've seen in Africa and in South America, where the perpetrators and the victims actually can report as to the things that have happened to them, and they can have their day airing what happened, and that in a way that there is an official truth seeking of what actually happened. Do you think that anything like that might be some type of concept or model of an action forward for something that just seems to be as pervasive as this has been for decades, if not centuries?
I mean, yeah, maybe. I think the challenge with something like that is the willingness of both parties to talk about what has happened. And with sexual assault, sexual harassment, it's so personal and so violating that creating some sort of public forum, I don't know if that's necessarily the right answer.
I don't know if it's the right answer either, but at least what I hear from the accounts that I read in Africa, that what has been happening has been so massive and pervasive that you could probably spend decades litigating and trying to get some type of legal remedy to this, and that in many ways what people want to do is they simply just want to move on with their lives, that they want to have some way to just get closure to this and move on.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, nobody wants to be sexually assaulted or harassed, and I'm sure being able to leave that behind is the number one desired outcome. But, by all accounts, your life has changed forever. So, seeking the truth and being heard and having an outlet for doing that, I think there's still the question of then what? But could there be some sort of truth and reconciliation committee where it's actually okay to speak the truth about what happened? Because the outcome could actually be that things are better for everyone than they were before, right? I mean, one of the ideas that I had, maybe there's some sort of matchmaking database where victims can sign up and say that they actually want to hear from their perpetrator, and then somehow obscure their address so the perpetrator can then reach out and apologize, but wouldn't necessarily need to know, their phone number or their address or anything like that. But you could actually get people to start communicating with each other without risk of further abuse.
Huh.
I don't know. That's kind of a weird idea.
Well, I think that we need ideas to come through this. I mean, you and I talked before this interview, and I find as a person who is determined by a Y chromosome, I feel a lot of shame for my gender, and I want to have this conversation. But when you and I talked about it before, I was worried, oh God, I'm going to talk to Lauren and she's going to hand my ass to me. I mean, that this is really difficult stuff to talk about. And I'm just trying to figure out a way. That's really, in many ways, what we're doing with this Us and Them podcast is to try to figure a way to erase, and if we can't erase, at least lessen the divide of how we can have this conversation between the things that separate us.
Yeah. And what's interesting is before today, women have felt shame about coming forward about what has happened to them, what had been done to them. And now we may be in a time when men are feeling shame or ashamed of coming forward about what they may have done or have done to women.
I think you're right.
And creating a space for that conversation to happen would be a good thing. I don't think we're right. I don't think we're there yet. I think there's so much anger. Anyone that raises their hand is just going to get pummeled right now. I think that it's going to take a little while before we can get to that space. We talk about these things happening to women, but it's actually men who are taking the action against women. And so women, we can't push this movement forward by ourselves. Men definitely have to play a role. I mean, they have to play a role by stopping doing what they're doing. And, what you're suggesting is fessing up to what they have done and acknowledging it and trying to make amends. From that standpoint of starting a kind of, let's call it step 2 of this national conversation, yes, I think that would be a pretty monumental thing to happen.
I believe Lauren is absolutely right. Men need to help us move forward. We need to clean up our side of the street. We need to call out those who've been abusing women. We need to encourage others to come clean and own up to their part in all of this. But the way I see it, this goes beyond outing individual men who've been misbehaving. We need to reshape our culture from one of male entitlement and dominance to one of equality. And I hope when the time is right, and I realize that it may be a while, that women will help create a space for men who wish to humbly come clean.
I've been having lots of conversations with women about the who's who of powerful men who've fallen from grace. I've been speaking with my mother, my sister, female cousins, and lots of friends.
Okay, coming. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'll be right there.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, see you later.
This is my friend Nancy Giles. You might know her. For years, she's been a regular contributor on the CBS Sunday Morning Show and is a frequent pundit on news programs on CNN and MSNBC. She always has strong opinions on things that are going on in this country. And this sexual misconduct tsunami is no exception. And I wanted to get her take on this whole thing.
Hey.
Well, hi, welcome. That's not on yet, is it? Yeah, it kind of is. Okay, fine. Hi, come on.
When I visited her home, she was kind of freaking out about this whole situation. It was the day after Al Franken announced his resignation, and it was looking like a pretty strong possibility that the following week, accused pedophile Roy Moore might win a seat in the U.S. Senate.
And there's a part of me that just feels like, please, you can't let this happen. God, you can't let this happen. You can't let someone like Trump help someone like that get in office at the time where, because of the circumstances, someone that I think had a lot to offer and was doing good work like Al Franken is on his way out. And I put Franken in a different category than John Conyers and the other guys. I do. It's hard. This is hard. This conversation is hard. I just like to say, yeah.
Nancy tells me she gets overwhelmed sometimes.
That's all I'm doing these days is like watching reruns of the Ed Sullivan Show. I have to take time away from the news and just go back and think about other things because it really is hard to process. It's hard to sleep. It's hard to see big, horrible changes like that happen. And it would be a body blow for me personally. Then I'd have to sort of go to the land of Ed Sullivan or some other reruns to sort of rejuvenate and then try to come out on the other side with some sort of plan of action.
But instead of retreating into Ed Sullivan land, Nancy and I lean into an intense discussion about what it might take to help our country heal from the trauma of all this sexual misconduct stuff. Like in my conversation with Lauren Schiller, Nancy and I kick around several ideas like slapping stiff lawsuits on the offenders, and I get her take on my truth and reconciliation idea. And at one point, an idea pops into my head. I've got another outside-of-the-box idea.
Oh, please.
And I don't know...
Because I really was hoping to have some laughs.
I don't know if you're going to laugh about this one.
Okay. Well, all right, give it to me anyway.
I think that if Bill Clinton were to come out and to say, my actions were deplorable, I hurt a lot of people, and I see where my part in where this has led us to the here and now. And I have to take some responsibility for that. You're shaking your head. Yes.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. And I have issues with him. I think that if he did that, that would be amazing. That to me then really clears a lot of the decks on our side, and then it's a mic drop moment if he does that. But his silence is deafening, you know?
If he were to say to Monica Lewinsky, for example.
Oh my God. Can you imagine that? I owe you an apology. I did, you were she wasn't a child technically. Well, she 19, 20, 21?
In her 20s.
Okay. I took advantage of
Early
you.
20s.
I was in a position of power. You worked for me. It was wrong. If he really, instead of I did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky,
And that basically what happened after that, your life was ruined.
Whether he said ruined, but I know I changed your life and probably not in a positive, she had a very, very, hey, I think that's an amazing idea. I would like to see something like that. That would really be something.
This might just be a pie in the sky idea. I admit it. But to have a known abuser come forward
and acknowledge that this is a new day, a day that requires a new code of conduct, where a man takes responsibility for his actions and doesn't cause his victims any further harm. If he put aside calculated political strategizing, genuinely owned up to his part in the mess, and humbly made amends to those who he'd harmed, that really would be something. But what do you think? Can you add your thoughts to the discussion on our Facebook page? We'd really like to hear your ideas. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our show was written and produced by me, Trey Kay, Lori Stern, and Mitch Hanley. Whitney Henry Lester and Cousin B helped us with editing. Special thanks to Ashley Ann Krigbaum for her technical assistance. Michael Lipton and Tristam Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. You can find both of my guests' podcasts, Inflection Point with Lauren Schiller and Nancy's The Giles Files, anywhere you pull up your podcasts. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the Mentorship Program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We wish you a happy 2018, and we'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.